Good morning, everybody. We're back on Wednesday with Mr. Grant from CreativeCashflow.com. I truly appreciate all of the wonderful things he does for this community out there. But what we'll be talking about today, last week we talked about some of the negotiation words that we used during our calls that we really liked. And we got such great feedback on that. We had a lot of people requesting that we come back and do even more on negotiation. So what we're going to do today is break down how Grant and myself would be working through a phone call from the moment the phone rings. Like once the phone rings and I answer, what are some of the things that I'm going to be doing on the phone call to try and make this move forward, all the way from taking the initial details to trying to either get the appointment or the contract. So that's what we'll be discussing on today's call. This is live, so feel free to drop questions. Feel free to jump in and add your own 2 cents on that. But with all that to be said, let's introduce and bring in Mr. Grant Kemp.
What's up, everybody? I am so glad to be here. Dude, negotiations, straight up, it's my favorite topic to talk about. I know everybody seems to know me as the sub two guy, and that's great, because that is something that I think because I'm so humble, like there's just a handful of people. There's maybe 4 or 5 other people in the nation that know the ins and outs of sub two and owner financing like I do, but we do everything. We do fix and flips. We do wholesaling. We do rentals. We do everything, right? If you've heard of it, I do it, with the exception of like tax sales. And the key deal here is it all boils back down to be a good negotiator, right? It doesn't matter what the deal is necessarily. If you're a great negotiator, you're going to get the best deal. So I always use the example of, would you rather spend all your marketing money and get 1,000 phone calls and take down 4 deals? Or would you rather spend your marketing money and get 10 phone calls and take down 8 deals? And the only difference is going to be negotiating and how you get into the deal and what you're looking for. And so this is a topic I'm super passionate about. I really like this particular part of how do you handle that perfect call? How do you handle making sure that your seller is going to be ready to sell to you at a price that's fair to them, but also gives you a great deal? And one of the things that I really like about the relationship that I've got with Daniel is that we buy houses differently. Daniel's a totally different personality than I am, and you're going to be a totally different personality than Daniel is or than I am. And the reason why this is so powerful for you is that you're going to start noticing some trends that happen amongst the high performers, amongst those that have the best conversion rates, where, yeah, so Daniel may speak Spanish and I might speak English, but we're using Latin, right? They're both Latin-based languages, and that Latin is how a brain works in negotiations. There are certain things that make your brain tick and make you say yes or no to things, and if you unlock the principles of influence, then you get to kind of fit that into whatever your style is. So we're going to introduce some ideas to you today with some specifics, some ways that we handle those calls. And I want you to go put those into play with the same scripts, the same words that we use. But over time, just understand you're going to find your own groove, and you may buy houses differently than we do, or you may buy them exactly like Daniel or exactly like me, but you're going to find that groove on your own. And having 2 of our stark different personalities presenting how we do it should be super beneficial to you. So let's start off with Daniel here. Daniel, tell me what is the context here? Okay, so are we doing outbound marketing and getting an inbound phone call? Is this cold calling? Does it matter? Are we talking about the first phone call? Where are we wanting to focus our biggest efforts on today's negotiating kind of premise on the phone call?
I personally think that there's a big difference between how you take a warm inbound lead and a cold call. The 2 premises are a different approach, and I was wanting to really stand in on the inbound warm lead. Let's say I'm doing some sort of marketing, bandit signs, I'm doing some sort of online marketing, I'm doing some form of direct mail marketing, and a seller has called me up, and it's already a little more pre-qualified of a lead because the seller is reaching out to you based upon some sort of advertising you've done. So you already should have the assumption that this call is leaning towards somebody's looking to sell their house, versus like when you're doing cold calling, this person may have never considered selling their house, and you're going to have to kind of push that call that direction. Well, today's episode will basically be pulling in on the direct marketing. How are we going to handle these types of phone calls?
Perfect. So how is it when you get, and I think that's the best way to do it, honestly, because that's, in my opinion, those are your strongest leads. Those are the leads you should be shooting for. And it's much more scalable in that fashion than it is to try and do the cold calling stuff. Cold calling's cool. It works. I don't really, but I think the scalability and we like the inbound phone calls. That's the best. So what is your goal of this phone call? When you get that first phone call from somebody coming in, let's start with your why. What are you trying to get away from that phone call? Just at its base, what's the goal here?
The very first thing I do anytime I take a phone call is I want to confirm who I'm speaking with, what property they're referring to, and then confirm the phone number that they're on. Because like I always want to do that within the first 45 seconds to a minute. It's like, hey, how are y'all doing? Or I'll take the phone call. Hi, this is Daniel, and they'll typically respond back like, hey, I got a postcard from you. I was calling to see what was going on. And the very next questions out of my mouth was like, well, can you confirm the property address for me and a name and a good contact number for you, just in case we get disconnected. And I don't do it just very directly like that, but I do try to get that out within the first 30 to 45 seconds because I want to make sure that A, I know what address I'm talking about, and B, who I'm talking to, and that I've got a good phone number for them. I personally like going at it that approach. Now, I don't know if that's right or wrong, but that's how I've always done it. And then I will lead in from there, now that I've got the address and a good name and number, with open-ended questions to start finding out more about the property. So that's typically how I open up my phone calls. Do you do something different, Grant?
Yeah, so one of the things that I have found to be successful for us, and I would encourage you guys to try and employ something along this lines, is over time we found that actually we have a far better conversion rate splitting out that first inbound phone call into multiple phone calls. Now, here's an interesting thing that some of you may have looked into and some of you may have not. Is what is the average amount of touches that you have with a seller over the phone by the time you get a signed contract and by the time that you close? And it is typically, most commonly, not going to be one. Okay, it's going to be multiple. So we actually have found ways to manufacture multiple phone calls so that it's like John, my sales manager. The way that he's put it, which I think is a good analogy, is that you don't go on a date with a girl on the first night and just ask her to marry you, right? And if you are going on a date on that first date, well, that date can feel like a much better date if you go to the movies and then go to the carnival and then go to get ice cream, because you've got these multiple interactions that are kind of in different settings that allow them to feel better rapport with you. So part of that is like separating that side out. So yeah, Daniel, you're absolutely right. We do want to collect that information, but the separation that I'll put there is that I actually put another person to answer our inbound phone calls other than the actual salesperson that's going to be handling the negotiation piece of it, so that we have one person that's kind of the gather who this is, gather what their contact phone, their contact information is, gather some of the information that we might need, but focus only on rapport and making these guys like us, so that then our salesperson can call back and now actually have a sales conversation with it. So very similarly, yes, and you'll probably get into that same thing, but yeah, we gather all that information. You got to get that right up front, get their motivating factors, get some core W questions out there, the what, whys, whens, all that kind of stuff, so that you know what this person's worldview is and what this person's situation is, so that you can speak the language they need to hear, right? Does that align?
Yeah, so what you're doing, and once again, like for everybody out there that's watching, one of the things that I think you stressed before we even got started on this, and I want everybody out there watching right now to understand, is that Grant is going to do this different than you. Grant is going to do this different than me. I'm going to do this different than Grant. I'm going to do this different than you. But what you need to understand is that while you're watching this, pick up on the key things that you're like, oh, that resonates well with me. I think I should do something similar, because you can never be just like somebody else. You can always figure out, though, what some of the things that someone else is doing that you're enjoying, and bring that in, so that way it remains natural and remains a part of your flow. Like, I am much more of a bulldog than Grant, like in some ways. Mm-hmm. I'm very direct. I'm not necessarily pushy, but I do definitely come across a little more pushy. And that right there is a difference between me and Grant. So I don't necessarily know that I could adopt Grant's style, because that's not me. And while I might be able to shift some things around to be more like Grant, I'm never going to be just like Grant. So I have to figure out the things that work for me.
And actually, can I interrupt you there for a second? Because
sure.
And I'm sorry, I say, can I interrupt you? And then I just immediately talk. Because I do want to interrupt. I think that, let me expand out on that for you guys. Okay. So Daniel pointed out, our first and primary motivation is that we're going to get information from them, including like their worldview and that kind of stuff. Well, Daniel, you said, hey, I'm much more of a bulldog. And I don't actually agree with that. I think that both of us are extremely aggressive, but I think that our aggression relies on different counteracting what's the word I'm looking for? We have a counterbalance to the aggression, right?
Okay.
And so aggression has this somewhat of it's a pejorative term. It's not a pejorative term. I don't mean aggression like, oh, I'm going to fight you if you don't sign it. But I do mean aggression like I don't leave that first appointment without a contract signed, right? I don't leave that phone call without, like my first phone call, my goal is I want a contract signed, right? My appointment, my goal is I want a contract signed, and I'm going to do everything in my power to get that. And I get pretty pushy, but I think the difference between us is, and this is where you guys who are watching need to be aware and take kind of a self-evaluation. Here's what I would pose to you guys first. Think about why it is that people work with you, okay? What is it about you that is a somewhat unique whatever, that makes people like being around you and like working with you? Well, here's the thing is negotiating and psychology and marketing is not PC. You've got to be super blunt about everything that's going on. And so let's just be real about the things that are happening. Both Daniel and I are aggressive. Daniel is this like super ridiculously smart. Like when he speaks, it's obvious that he knows everything in the world, and he's got this like Poindexter brain up here. And Daniel, I hope you don't mind me sharing this, but like I had to like kind of drag Daniel into the public light years ago, saying like, dude, you've got a lot to say. Like you need to be doing these public speaking events. You need to be doing. So like got him in front of it, and he's like sweating bullets and like shuffling. And he's like, I'm just not a good public speaker. I'm like, that is your thing. Like the fact that you're not polished cuts through, and everybody knows that you're real from day one, right? So Daniel can be super aggressive because Daniel is also such a like heady guy, and his charm is, hey, I'm not the most polished guy. I'm just the guy who's going to tell you the truth, and I'm the guy that's going to get something done, and there's something to said for that. Now, I'm super aggressive too. I don't leave that first appointment without a contract. I leave 85% of my appointments, my first appointments, 85% of them I leave with a signed contract that we're able to close on. That's my conversion rate. I'm pushy. I'm aggressive. But I rely on charm. I've kind of got this like, hey, what's up? Let's do this, right? And like I kind of rely on the charm to counteract the aggression. So what are you going to rely on? So Daniel, does that make sense? Am I hitting on something that you agree with or disagree with there?
That does, and I think
what I'm trying to get at, and sorry, let me finish that up real quick. What I'm trying to get at for you guys is that every high converter I know, every single one of them is aggressive. You have to be aggressive and pushy. But every single one of them has their own way with providing comfort to the seller and receiving this aggressive, they know that we're here to buy a house. There's no question about that. We wouldn't be talking if it weren't for us to buy their house. So why are we messing around with all this other stuff? They don't mind that. Every high converter I know is aggressive. It's just a matter of how do you still build rapport within that.
So I think the key difference between whatever I was trying to say, and we'll get back on topic here real fast, is I think the difference is you're persistent, Grant. I would say you're very persistent. Like you don't take no for an answer and you keep going and going and going. But that persistence really isn't as direct and forward as I am. I am not a charmer. Mm-hmm. I am not a conversationalist. I'm very much an introvert. I don't really enjoy the conversation. Like whenever a seller starts getting off topic and they're trying to get away from the talking about the house and they're trying to talk about all the other stuff in their life, like I will play along with it as long as I have to, but I am deathly like afraid of those conversations. I can't stand them, and I'm constantly pulling it right back to the house because I don't want to have those other conversations. They don't really play in well to my objective, and I do get really pushy about bringing it back to topic. Yeah.
So we talked about your first stage there, and I think that's all you guys, and Kip Stevens here says right on point, great points here. We're getting a lot of positive feedbacks on that because again, like you've got to set your compass to close. You are not there for any other reason than to buy that house, and they know that. So there's no point in trying to be their counselor. You need them to have that verbal diarrhea. You need to understand what they're what their life is like so that you can figure out how you're going to be able to help them. But you don't need to let them just talk at you and control that conversation. You need to bring that thing back to the closing of this house as constantly as possible. So Daniel, you're starting off with these whys, these who are you? Am I talking to the right person? How do I contact you? What's your best contact? And W questions. What's the so now we've kind of set that foundation. What's your next stage of your call?
So one of the things that I like about starting the conversation out like that is it gives me almost a level of perception of control, because I'm asking some very direct questions up front and fast. And if I can get them to respond back with the answers to them, I'm kind of now in control of the conversation. And I want to leave myself in control of that conversation. I'll let them talk all day long. I don't really like the talking part. I want them to talk, but I want to guide the direction of that conversation. So the next thing I'll do is, now that I've got the address, I'll ask some very open-ended questions. I'll ask something along the lines, can you tell me a little bit about the house, the current condition of the house, and what it is, what the reasons why you're looking to sell? You know, I'll kind of ask all of them at once. And because my goal right there is, I just want them to start talking as much as they possibly can, because I got the address right up front. And while I've got them talking, I'm listening, but I try not to interrupt. Maybe every once in a while they'll say something that I have more interest in, and I'll ask them another question. But the question I ask is to just keep them talking. I want that first 2 to 3 minutes of the phone call for that person to just be talking and talking and talking about the house. Because during that 2 to 3 minutes, I'm sitting there in front of my laptop. I've got it pulled up on my phone or something. I'm looking up all the details of that property online. I'm either looking it up in the county records, I'm looking it up on the tax assessor, I'm looking it up on the MLS. I open up Propelio, I type in the address, and now while that person's talking, I'm looking up all the important details about the house. I'm looking at the beds, baths, year built, square footage. Some of the things that I'll notice is, like, if I see tax records say square footage 1,300 and the seller's telling me something like 1,600, I know that there's a discrepancy there, so I'll ask the seller about that. These are ways for me to probe and get more information about the house. Let that person talk while I do my own investigation in the background. One of the key things I'm doing in the background is trying to determine what the ARV is, so I know that right off the front without even getting too deep into the conversation. What about you?
I love that. That is, I absolutely agree with that. So here's one of the things that I want to pull out of that. So here's what we'll kind of do, right? Maybe I think that this would maybe be a good point. Is, as you're talking, let me pull out kind of the Latin, like I mentioned, right? What are the things? What is the core of what I view as being helped with that? And then as I put my pitch, maybe you pull out the Latin of that. Like, it's not how you would have done it, but this is the principle. This is what's pulling it out. The Latin that I'm pulling out on that is, and again, you know, saying every seller speaks a different language, every buyer speaks a different language, you speak a different language. But if they're all based in Latin, let's figure out what the Latin is. So you were talking about the control of it. I think that control is one of the biggest points that we can possibly pull out of this, okay? You are in control of this conversation, and if you are not, you're not being a good negotiator, okay? We got to think about the fact that this is what you do professionally. You know how to buy houses. You are sitting here on a Wednesday morning or whatever it is that you're watching the replay, learning more techniques about this. This is probably the first house that this person's ever sold, okay? So why do we, in the name of rapport, let them control the conversation when it's us that knows how things go? So what happens is, mentally, if we are not pushing that conversation forward with these questions, these very direct questions like what Daniel is referencing here, if we're not being very direct about this stuff and just really showing our willingness to talk about a hard question like it's nothing, then what we're showing them is like, hey, I'm the beta here, you're the alpha here, I need you to run the show. And they don't know how to run the show. They've never done it before, but they're gonna, because of just social contract, feel the necessity to fill that time and to kind of push things forward. And it's not gonna go down the road that you want it to go down. I see that happen all the time, especially with new negotiators. So keep in mind that you're the guest of honor. They have called you to open the conversation because, and only because, you exist in their mind to help solve this one particular problem, which is selling their house. So always pulling it back there brings that control aspect, which is going to help you infinitely here in 30 minutes or so when you've got to take that pitch and explain them why. Keeping control up front, you've taught them how to treat you and how you're going to be treated. And at the end, it's going to help you infinitely for getting that put out. The other thing that I really liked that you were saying is, like, you're keeping asking them, you're letting them talk while you're researching the house. One of the other common mistakes that I see people make is that they'll do all this research on all these houses before even sending the marketing, or before like picking up the phone, they'll do all this research. So even myself, right? Like I stopped taking our initial phone calls years ago, and I'll talk about why in that some of the influential principle that we're using on that. But even though somebody else on my staff has taken that initial phone call and done the initial gathering of information, and to that point, we did have a question come in from Kit that says, how do you follow up on the conversation after the person has built rapport? are those calls recorded? You have no clue what we talked about. And that's a good point. So yes, every call in my organization is recorded. I don't listen to them a lot, but it's good for coaching, people and listening. And what if a seller says, well, your person told me I could get this, then you go back and listen. Or if a seller says, man, that other person was a jerk, you can go back and listen to it. However, the real key is you've got to have a good CRM. You got to have a system that they put information into and your salesperson extracts the information from, okay? Hitting those kind of key points. And I've got a field called rapport information that we write everything from their dog's name to their husband's name to like literally everything that we can think of that has to do with rapport gets put into there. So that's how that side gets taken care of. But what Daniel was talking about, the Latin here, is even in that situation, when I'm calling a phone, returning a phone call, and we already have information, I still have not yet even put their address into Google. I make my outbound call, I talk to them, and when I start to get the idea that this is a reasonable seller that we may have a deal with, that is when I do the exact same thing as Daniel. We ask questions, we let them talk while we push the button that opens up the map and we look at this neighborhood and we do a little Google street view drive around. I put their address into Propelio because Propelio gives me so much information about like the comps and the buyers in the neighborhood and how many non-owner occs we have and that kind of stuff. I really like, by the way, this. So Propelio just had a new revamp within this last few weeks, 2 or 3 weeks even. And one of the things I really like about it is now there's a tab every time you search it that says buyers, and it shows you the neighborhood as like, hey, these are all the houses. And it shows you if it's owner occupied, non-owner occupied, like vacant, all that kind of stuff. And it lets you really know, hey, is this a high rental neighborhood? Is this a high owner occupied neighborhood? Information like that right off the bat. While they're talking is when we do our due diligence. Because if you do all this due diligence before you know you can get a yes on a contract, you have wasted time that could have been used buying another house, right? So I love how you do that, Daniel. So you're asking questions, you're letting them talk, and you're researching while they're talking, not before. While they're talking, you're researching. What next?
Well, I want to bring that back in because Don Rich said something that touched base on the show we had last week where we were talking about head, heart, and gut on some of the things we were hitting on. One of the key things that I do find that during that initial exploratory questions, I can somewhat gauge, am I dealing with a heart person or am I dealing with a head person? Because whenever I ask those exploratory questions, a head person is going to give me a ton of just details. They're going to tell me like the square footage of the house, the year built, the number of bedrooms, the last time they did this down to the date. They're going to give me super fine details. What I find though with heart people is a lot of times they'll start telling me stories. They'll tell me a little bit, the stories about the house. Okay, well, when I bought it, this is how it went. I fell in love with this house, and I've owned it for 25 years. I've raised my family here. So you'll start picking up right off of those initial exploratory questions on the type of person you're going to be dealing with. And then I try to manage my phone call from that point moving forward based upon who I think I'm talking to. Am I dealing with a heart person? If I am, I'm going to leave it much more on the emotional type of stuff, talking about, okay, helping them out with additional stories and kind of mimicking. I don't know who talks about it or, I don't want to call it the inventor, but whoever talks about mirroring and modeling. Mirroring and modeling, I do believe has to deal with neuro-linguistic programming, NLP. But if I've got somebody on the phone and they're talking real fast, I tend to talk fast, especially when I'm nervous. But if I'm on the phone with somebody and they're like, hey, you know what? I bought this house probably about, 15 years ago. And, from there I've had it and I tried doing a little additional. They're talking real slow. Their tone is a little bit lower. I'm not going to come back with them like, okay, so you bought that house 15 years ago. You did this, you did that, you did this. Okay, if you do those types of things, it's not going to work. So those exploratory questions give me the ability to kind of mimic what's going on. But once I've got the basic details of the house, I've already researched that. And the reason I'm asking the seller form is so that way I can confirm what I've already found out on my own due diligence during the initial start of that phone call. Now I really just push straight into what is the motivation. Okay, I figured out the details of the house. The next thing I'm going to follow up with is, so why are you trying to sell this? Have you spoken with anybody else about this yet? These are some of the types of questions I move into next, is because I'm trying to really try and pinpoint what it is that they're trying to do with this house and why they're trying to sell it. Now, when I ask that question, I don't find any immediate pain points that are really apparent, such as I just lost my job, I'm about to move, I'm behind on payments, I inherited this house, there's more repairs here than I can handle. If I don't hear any of those common motivators, I'll try and extract one from them And one of the things that I found is whenever I was doing a massive amount of postcards, I was doing about 15 to 20,000 postcards a month 4 or 5 years ago. I was getting about 350 to 400 inbound phone calls a month. If I got 350 to 400 inbound phone calls a month, I can't spend 2 hours on every phone call. I got to really quickly determine which calls I need to point my time to. So once I found out if I do or do not have a strong motivator, I will then push forward with a ballpark range of what is this person looking for. Like, I'll ask them straight up. It's like, okay, so, what is it that you're looking for to get out of this house? Like, what is it that you're trying to get out of the house? I've already figured out my ARV. If I know my ARV is 140 and the very next thing out of that person's mouth is they're wanting 135 for the house, I now know that the motivation might not be there, and I'll tailor the rest of my conversation based upon what I know that they're looking to get out of the house.
Yeah, no, I like that too. So what we've pulled here so far, just as a recap on Daniel's method, I'm kind of taking some notes here, is like, one, make sure you're talking to the right person, do open-ended questions to maintain control of this conversation, control where it's going on at. Two is you keep asking them. Once you verify that you're talking to the right person about the right property, then you start asking them those questions while you're researching things in the background, asking the seller about discrepancies, that kind of thing. Three, you're learning from this action if they are a head or heart or a gut, and you are giving them what I like to call auditory mirroring. I think that it was Dale Carnegie that really popularized the whole mirroring concept, which is a great concept. For those of you who are not familiar with it, if you're standing in a room, and I would try this, right? Just behind the scenes. Next time you're with a group of friends and you're having like a lunch or something where they're thinking about something else, you're at a game night, they're thinking about something else, and you're just kind of chatting about stuff, do this for me. Sit back and like cross your legs a certain way, like put your, cross your legs, leg over leg or something like that. And then watch over the next 5 minutes, as long as everybody else is in a similar type of chair, and see who sits back and crosses their legs, because those are the people that you have the closest contact to. They feel connected to you, and it's a subconscious thing. It's called mirroring, and it is absolutely real. So we will intentionally use that principle. And if somebody is, like he said, if they're talking fast, we're going to talk fast. If they're talking slow, we're going to talk slow. If you're in front of them and they stand like this a lot, you're going to need to find a reason to stand like this a lot, right? You mirror what they're doing because subconsciously they have learned over their life that the people who mimic what they're doing are the people that they are close to. Okay. I think Tony Robbins brought this up in the mirroring aspect of things. And he said, and I really liked, because it's like, who do people like, right? If you answer the question, Daniel, who do people like? Maybe this is too broad, but I think you'll get this, what I'm looking for. Daniel, who do people like?
People like people that either mimic their views and styles and or challenge them to do better. And I'm just throwing that kind of out there, but I mean, generally people want to be around people that they associate with, that they find things in common with. Similar. There you go.
Yeah,
similar.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head, right? So I have always said people like people who are like them, right? That's why the billboards in any kind of demographic, just pay attention to whichever neighborhood you're in. If that demographic is highly one race over another race, guess what? The billboards are going to have a lot of people of that color on the billboard because in marketing, people like people that are like them. But the thing that I hadn't ever taken it to the next step of that Daniel just did is people like people that are like them or like who they want to be like, right? And so we're going to be sitting more in that role as a negotiator. And so by presenting the mirroring and presenting our authority, they will get that rapport because they're going to like you because you're in a position that helps them. So he's learning if they're a head, heart, or gut, and he's doing what I call the auditory mirroring. He's using mirroring that you can hear over the phone, speaking fast, speaking slow. Maybe you've got a little bit more of a Southern drawl on this person than you do that person, that kind of stuff. Step 4, why are you looking to sell? I think this is hands down one of the most important questions that you can ever ask. And I really liked how you said, look, you can't spend a lot of time on each phone call when you're doing volume. Our KPI, we want our guys to be on the phone for 20-ish minutes. Okay, it's hard to get down to that. I think we're at 30 to 40, but 20 to 30 is really where we want to be. And then 5 is you're finding from that, why are you looking to sell, kind of an A-B branch. This is really, if I'm extracting this right, and you tell me, this is really where you have your first presentation possibility where you're going to take a different avenue depending on what their situation was. So your stage 1 was really a full-blown discovery stage up to this point. this is really the first fork in the road that you have, isn't it, Daniel? That you say, well, if they feel this way, if they're super motivated, I'm going to go down this road. If they're not super motivated, I'm going to go down this road. Is that right?
Yeah, and I want that phase one to normally be around 5 minutes or less. I want to figure out the details, kind of get a ballpark of what type of person I'm dealing with, and then from there I move forward into let's get to the money part, because that's typically the part that takes the most time and that the most people try to avoid. I try to get straight to it as fast as I can, because if I'm getting 350 or so phone calls, and let's say that averages out to, let's say, 10 phone calls a day, I'm looking at a full day of phone calls just off of those 10 phone calls. So I need to be aware of that. And one of the things that I do want to rewind back and just touch base on real fast before we move on is when we're looking at this mirroring and modeling, some people might be able to misconstrue that as being manipulative, as being, some magician that's trying to take advantage of these people. I want to break this down and explain why I'm doing this and why I find it to be important. Most people are gonna want to do business with people that they like. That's why we talk about rapport so much. Rapport will buy more houses than anything else. Well, the quickest way for me to build that rapport and move that ball forward is to be likable. I'm not trying to be likable to manipulate these people, but ultimately my job is to buy the house. If I offer $115,000 for the house and somebody else offers $115,000 for the house, the seller is likely going to go with the person that they like the most. So I, as being a part of this and really wanting to be doing a good job, I need to be likable. And a very big part of being likable is the rapport, which does come from mirroring and modeling. So I'm not doing the mirroring and modeling to be deceptive. I'm not doing the mirroring and modeling to be deceitful. I'm doing it strictly because it's the fastest way to build a community.
This is actually the biggest show of respect that you can possibly give to your seller, because if you are not speaking to them in the language that makes sense to them, then what you are effectively saying is, hey, I know that you like to communicate with talking really slow, but that's the wrong way to communicate. My way is the right way to communicate. I like talking fast and I like talking about numbers. Oh, you like talking about the emotions of everything? That's the inferior way. The right way to think about this is to talk about the numbers. And so it's super disrespectful for them to not mirror what they're doing, because we need to show them that they're the hero. They're the ones that matter. So we need to give them that respect and speak to them in a language that they understand and relate to, and the selfish return of that, your chance of conversion does go higher.
I love that.
So let's take this into that next step there.
Yeah. So the next step is while they have kind of been talking, giving me the details of the property, I do the research and I get an idea of what the ARV is, and kind of based upon the conversation so far, I've got a general idea of what I think the property's probably worth in its current condition. It's just kind of a real ballpark number. It might be like, if it's $150,000 ARV, I'm sitting here thinking, all right, I'm probably going to be offering somewhere between $40,000 to $70,000. That's like a $30,000 swing, but I've already kind of got a window of where I'm likely wanting to be. And then I broach the question of hey, you know what? What are you looking to get out of this house? What is your motivation to get out of here? And if their response is like, I want to get $140,000 for the house, and I know it's not worth more than $150 in its perfect condition, I now know that either I have to get this seller to drop their price significantly, take creative terms, and take the payments over time, or I need to end the phone call. I see a lot of new people that will take a phone call and make that phone call last for 3 weeks because they're doing everything they can to hold on to the only lead they've got, whereas they really should have been spending the next 3 weeks trying to get more leads. But I immediately take that A-B route. They're within that range that, like, let's just say 40 to 70,000 is in the back of my head where I'm wanting to offer, and they come back at 90. 90 is not that far off of where I want to be. And that's not that far off. So I'll hold on to that phone call. But if I've got somebody that's asking for 140, 150, and I know the house is only worth 140, 150 all fixed up, then I will immediately start really pushing to find out really fast how motivated this person is to knock the price down. And that's kind of where I start tailoring the conversation from there.
Fantastic. So once you've found their motivations, once you're tailoring that, what are you setting your goal to? Are you setting your goal to, I want to send you a contract over the phone and have you sign it? Or are you setting your goal to, I want to go on an appointment?
So I've never been a contract over the phone person. I was in a different state of the market cycle. I was heavily investing from probably around 2008-ish to about 2016 or so. And while there was likely a lot of virtual contracting going on during that time, all of the training that I ever received and all of the activity I ever done was in-person appointments in my local market. I'd never done any virtual wholesaling, so contracting over the phone has been a relatively new experience for me over the past 2 to 3 years. And I believe that really evolved in this industry just as it got more and more competitive. People were like, if I wait to get to that house, 24 hours, that's 24 hours that deal could be gone. So people started really pushing to contract over the phone. But honestly, if I jump back into it heavy right now, I don't see why contracting over the phone really wouldn't just be an evolution to move forward to anyways. It saves more time and it gives you the ability to contract much faster.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think that the over the phone contracting is absolutely where people need to be focusing their efforts. And especially right now. Right now, we're still in the middle of this pandemic and people don't expect you to show up to their house. So you've got this like free key to trying out a new strategy. If this isn't how you've done before, you've got a great open door to getting that as a model tested out right now. And I think that, literally, and I'm not trying to blow smoke up your rear here, Daniel, but what Daniel's done with Propelio is a big key to that, right? We have technologies now that we did not have 6 and 7 and 8, 10 years ago, right? So my position is, look, we've got technology we never had before to where you do have the tools to go in any market and buy remotely and sell remotely in any way. It's a lot of work, but it's in my opinion, the way to go. And people don't expect you to show up anyway. So go to the place with the best numbers and buy those houses over the phone. I think now is a good time to transition into that. So you're setting that appointment. And so, I think that we're coming up on the end of your call at this point in time, aren't we? And then, where are you taking the call from here? You've pushed to find their motivation. Now you're saying, hey, these are the couple of offer routes that we can go. You've given us a couple of ideas of how you're presenting that to them to see as kind of a test, like, hey, I'm going to throw this out here with a range and see how they react to that. And then I can know how aggressive I can be from that point. But how are you taking it from here? How much longer on this call do you have? Are you really just at this point trying to get them to be ready for you to show up or what?
So on that side, it really depends upon the A/B split. If I go the path of, this person's not really motivated, my goal really shifts to, let's get this person on a follow-up drip where I call them back every 30, 45 days or something like that. But I'm trying to get off that phone call as fast as I possibly can once I realize that person is likely not going to be a deal, because every moment that I spend on that phone call with somebody that's not a deal is taking away from a phone call that really could be my payday. So I try to really quickly target, okay, if they're wanting retail value, why? Why do you want retail value? Is it because, you have an immediate need for cash? Is it because you're being irrational in your anticipated value of this property? And if that is the case, I will try to really quickly pull their value down or their expectations down. And if they're holding very firm to that number, I'm not going to really spend a whole lot of time, because if they're holding firm to 140,000 on 150K ARV, when I know that I'm not really wanting to spend more than 70K on the property, I'm probably not going to get that seller to drop 70 grand when they're holding that firm. So I will immediately bail on that call as fast as I can. And that doesn't mean I ignore them. I just put them on a future follow-up. I'll just put them in my CRM and say, follow up in 30 days, call them back. Okay, because their motivation might change in that 30 days. But if I got a phone call where the seller's like, I'm wanting 90, well, that's a totally different scenario. I'm now on that phone call until I can move forward and in the past get the appointment, but in the current market and the way things are moving today, until I got the contract. So if I know they're at 90, and I'm thinking that my max offer is 70, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start opening up more probing questions, more exploratory questions to find out exactly what the motivations are, not just from the situation of the house, but what is it that the seller is truly wanting. Like, I found through my marketing and through my conversations with sellers that there are often ancillary things other than price that the seller finds considerably important. Like, sometimes I need to know that my kids are going to be able to stay in this school district. That's something that they're worried about. I know that I'm going to have to find someplace else to move. I haven't figured that out yet. I don't really want to move. I don't really want to deal with the stress of packing and all of that stuff. These are things that the seller are going to have going on in their mind. So I'm going to start opening up with exploratory questions to find out, other than just the price, what other pain points are we going to have to negotiate during this phone call? Because if I'll open up with the questions like, all right, so with the sale of this house, have you considered where you're going to move? Because I've had enough phone calls with sellers to know that is something that they are going to need to figure out. Now, if their immediate response is, "Oh, I've already got that figured out. I'm just going to move in with my brother, and we're going to do it like that." Boom, I know that's not a problem. I don't even need to touch base on that anymore. But if they hit back with, "I'm not really sure yet, that's been kind of on my mind and I need to get that figured out," well, then I will leave that topic on the table and I will drill a little deeper into that so that way I can figure out, okay, what is it going to need to happen for this person to get moved? And I will help the seller work through that problem right then and there, so that way when I am probing through this conversation to determine how to set up my offer to make it the highest probability of getting a contract right then and there, I will try and include, okay, how are we going to get you moved? Where are we going to get you moved? How's all of that going to work? Other things will be like, hey, we need to stay in the school district, or B, I need $4,000 to catch up the payments on my car. I need to do this. I need to do that. Whenever I find out that a seller is very close in regards to the offer that I'd be willing to make, I am now going to start moving through all of the ancillary negotiation pieces that need to be had to make sure we get this deal to close, because most people only focus on the price. And what I have found is that price, while being an important factor, is not always one of the most important factors for people. And if the only problem that you solve is the price, then you might have 6 other problems that didn't get solved, and that's why they're not contracting, but you haven't asked the right questions to figure out what those other problems are.
Yeah, absolutely. And the way that I extract that out and the way that I try to train that principle to people, which I think is so important, is I boil it down into this phrase: we don't care what they want. We care why they want what they want. Okay. So I know that, there's a little bit of shock to that. You're like, of course we care what they want. We don't care what they want. We care why they want what they want. Now, if the why behind what they're asking for aligns, then that's great. But here's a perfect example, right? My house that I live in is a sub-2 property that I purchased. Well, the guy that I bought it from, it was like 25,000 behind or 30 behind or something like that. So I was already gonna have to put 30 on the line to catch this thing up. And he wanted me to give him 30 grand. Well, we have a lot of equity in the property. There's room enough to do that. But now I'm reaching into my pocket for 60 grand. That's a lot of money. That's not an insignificant amount. He was dead set on getting 30 grand in his pocket to leave. Well, because I went down the same path that Daniel is talking about here and started extracting why he wanted what he wanted. It was the exact point of what he brought up earlier, what Daniel did, where he wanted his kids to stay in this school district for the end of the year, which was going to be 6 months at that point in time. And because of some child custody stuff, he needed to be in the county, needed to find some place. So, well, instead of the payments here were only like $2,400 or something like that, right? So instead of 30 grand in his pocket, because I extracted the why, which was that he wanted to have security and he wanted his kids to stay in school for 6 months, I just offered to buy the house from him, catch it up, and allow him to stay here rent-free for 6 months, which cost me $12,000 or $1,500 or $15,000 instead of $30,000, and was no harm, no foul on my end. Like, we owned the house, it was rent free for 6 months, and I saved $15,000 to $18,000 by extracting why instead of what. So always look for the why. That is the most important thing that you can find from somebody in this. So now you've kind of extracted their motivations. There's why. Let me ask you this, Daniel. You said, hey, when you find that this person is wanting full retail and they're not backing off, I mean, it's really basically they need a realtor at that point in time or whatever that might be. You encouraged saying, hey, I don't spend time on that because I could be using that on another call. Would you give the advice to a brand new person that hasn't been on an appointment? Would you also say, hey, during this, because what you're doing, you're effectively pre-screening at that point of whether or not you're going on the appointment. So what I'm boiling out is that, so we're talking about how you do it, how we do it, but is that the advice that you would give somebody who has not yet taken down a bunch of houses to focus on the pre-screen and whether or not they have the motivation to show up? Or would you maybe give them the advice to try to get on as many appointments as possible? How would you speak to somebody who might not be at that stage where they have all of these houses under their belt like you do on that topic?
I love that you brought that up because that's a very fair question, because what I do, what you do is not always going to be what everybody else should really be doing at the current stage of their business development process. If I was brand new in this business and I'm not getting 350, 400 inbound phone calls a month, I'm likely going to spend more time on that phone call as practice. You know what? They're wanting 140. Let me just go ahead and see what I can do to try and get that number house, get comfortable with the process of being with the seller, getting comfortable with the process of walking a house, exploring what the condition is, and just getting through that will probably help you through some of your newer jitters as a real estate investor and be beneficial to you. Now, I don't recommend you hold on to that process for long because it really is, let's just say it's going to likely take you 3.5 hours of your day to go drive to somebody else's house. Let's say it's a 30-minute drive there and back. So that's probably an hour. You're likely going to do a little bit of due diligence and preparation for the appointment. Let's call that another 45 minutes. And then you're probably going to be at the house for another hour. So that 3.5 hours, I don't consider to be revenue generating activity. Now that is probably training for yourself. That's probably other things like that. But do go out there and try and get into as many houses as you can. I believe it was Homevestors. Part of the Homevestors training
I was going to bring that up.
Try to get into 100 houses as fast as you possibly can. So there is benefit to that. But as you scale, you need to learn to figure out which properties are likely going to get you paid, which ones are highly unlikely to get you paid, and only focus on the ones that are going to get you paid.
Yeah. And sorry, I'm pushing back an appointment here that I had butted up against this because I just want to make sure that I'm giving you guys
moving forward from there, okay, hit it up.
Well, I just wanted to reinforce that. Yes, I agree with that. I think that on your very first, when you haven't gone on appointments and you haven't taken deals down, I think it is the thing for you to do is to try and get in. I think, and I was texting there, but I think Homevestors was get inside of 100 houses as quickly as you can. I don't know which number you use there. We may be off or we may be on, but I think that it's important. You got to get your jitters out. You got to get that training right up front. It's a good idea to do that. Get out there. So Daniel, now that you've kind of set the stage, you've gotten a lot of motivational stuff, right? You've got it kind of figured out where they're at. You don't care what they want. You care why they want what they want. What I'm hearing is a lot of discovery. I'm not hearing a lot of close, right? So what are you closing on? What are you trying to do with that information that you've received from them? Are you using that on the phone and prepping them with a number so that it's like, hey, here's the number that I'm going to come to contract you with? Or are you just saying, okay, now I've got all this information, I'm going to show up at the house and we'll talk about it there? How do you take that? How do you land the plane with a seller on the phone so that you're not just spending the 3 or 4 hours?
Yeah, I truly appreciate you asking because that's an important piece. And I think, just like we had earlier, we had an A/B split between are they motivated, are they not motivated? If they're not motivated, I do hit them up very hard with a cold offer over the phone. It's like, I know you're at 140, but realistically, my numbers are nowhere near that. So, are we even playing ball if I could come in somewhere with, let's just say, I haven't seen the house. I don't know a whole lot about it, but I'm going to throw out a wide range. Like if I was somewhere between $40,000 to $90,000, does that sound like a possibility? And almost always it's going to be a no. So I get off of that phone call really quick. But on the other side, if I am on the phone with a seller that has a high probability of motivation, I'm trying to extract from them a number as to what they want for it. I try not to pitch a number right then and there. If I cannot get them to give me a number, then I do put a fairly wide pitch out there of like, okay, I haven't really seen the house, and I do things different because I was not contracting over the phone. My goal was always to get the appointment. If I saw a high probability of motivation and I'm able to get them at a low number, my next goal was appointment ASAP. Not, okay, it's Wednesday at noon. Let's go ahead and have an appointment Saturday at 8 a.m. That was never the case. It's Wednesday at noon. I want to have an appointment at 12:01. I want to have an appointment at 12:02. What, you're not available at 12:02? Can we get an appointment at 12:13? Because a motivated seller will sell the house to whoever shows up first. Almost always they're going to show it to whoever shows up first. So my goal was to get on that appointment absolutely as fast as possible. Like if they're at work right now, I'm going to return back with, okay, what time do you get off work? Okay. Oh, okay. So you got to go pick up the kids. You got to get them taken care of. You got to do this. You got to do that. I'm available at 9:30 tonight. I'll be over there at 9:30 tonight. So my goal was always then and there to get the appointment ASAP. Now, I would do things differently. Like if we're looking at virtual contracting, then yes, I would move straight into negotiations. It's like, okay, I know they're at 90. I know ARV's 150. I'm not really going to be able to offer more than 64 for this property in its present condition based upon the things that I'm hearing over the phone. That's when I do start moving forward as if I was just sitting there in the house and I needed to close the deal. I would start moving through probing questions. Okay, have you ever got any other offers? Why are you on that $90,000 number? What makes you think $90,000 is what the house is worth? And then if I can't get them off the $90,000, then I'll start moving through, discovery questions of like, how did you come up with that price? Here's why I don't think that price is adequate. Where are you thinking that, these types of things? Why do you think 90,000 is a good number? And I'll start trying to get them to chip away from it at that point in time and then move into contracting at that point in time.
Mm-hmm. Do you change any of that based on the head, heart, and gut thing?
Oh yeah, most definitely. Like that moves. Sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, that moves into like our conversation last week. Like if I know that I'm on the phone with a head person, I have to really start moving through the details of why I don't think their $90,000 is very important, or not important, but not accurate. Okay. What do you think this home is worth all fixed up? I'll ask that question. And you know what? If they give me a number that's realistic, I'll accept that. If it's extremely high and inflated, then maybe I need to go through and explain some details. Like, okay, I don't have the ability to screen share with them right there, but I'm like, okay, where did you come up with that number from? Okay, I see that, about 2 blocks away, a very similar home to you in size, square footage, sold in pristine condition with all of these updates for XYZ number. And they're like, oh, well, I know that my neighbor sold for 30,000 more than that. I was like, okay, yeah, I know that your neighbor sold for 30,000 more than that. I actually am looking at that right now, but that house is actually 400 square foot bigger. And then the seller hits back and is like, oh no, my house is actually bigger because I did an addition. Okay, well now I know that the addition's there. This gives me the ability to really calculate where they're getting their numbers from. And if their numbers are accurate, then I hold sight to them. If they're not, then I try to use details, facts, and figures to pull them back to line with what reality is. And okay, so if their ARV is accurate, well, then why are they thinking 90? Maybe the repair budget is inaccurate. I'll start taking a look at the repair budget and try and make sure that their repair budget is accurate. And then if the repair budget happens to be accurate and they're still at the 90,000, then I will start going through the profit centers that I as a company am looking at. It's like, okay, you're asking 90. We're both saying that the repairs are likely going to be 35,000, so I'm going to be into this property for 125. I'm looking at a 150 resale. There's 25,000 in anticipated profit that you're looking at there, Mr. Seller. Well, let's take a look at some of the fees that I'm looking at. I've got closing costs because in part of my offer is I'm agreeing to pay for your closing costs. I need to take that into consideration. I also need to take into consideration resale fees. Whenever I turn around and resell this property, I'm going to have to work with agents. I'm likely going to have to deal with concessions. The average concessions in this marketplace is about 2%. So here are some of the things. So after everything's said and done with, I'm looking at about an $8,000 profit. And that's not even really covering what I'm looking at for my office expenses, my office, my employees, and all that type of stuff. And while it sounds like a really big profit's coming out of this at $25,000, you're looking at gross. Really, really what I'm looking at is I need to be at XYZ. And then I go through that path with a head person. If that was a heart person, everything I just said would likely fall flat and they'd get bored and they'd start thinking about something else. So if I'm dealing with a heart person, I'm really going to start looking at, okay, how are we going to make this house look? What are some of the things we're going to do? Now that you're dealing with the house, what are some of the things you would update? And I'd start getting them to tell me all the things they'd want to do to the house. And I'd be like, have you ever had any of that bid before? And then I'll touch base on the prices, but I'm not going to make that the biggest point of my conversation. Does that make sense, Grant?
Absolutely, yeah. So I think that it's good to, again, give the respect to your seller, and we even did have, like on, I think it was on Facebook, Catrice says, thanks again for talking about the psychology of speaking in terms the seller can understand as a sign of respect, not as manipulation. And yeah, absolutely. I really want you guys to understand that, because what you are telling people, if you do not speak to them in a way that makes sense to them, you are telling them that their decision process is inferior to yours, that you have the right way to think about things, you have the right way to communicate, and they don't. So Daniel is absolutely right. You've got to feed things that make sense to them. So here's what I'd like to do. One thing I do want to point out, Daniel said, hey, I want to get my appointment as soon as possible. And that is absolutely right. I'm going to add a caveat to that. I want my appointment as soon as possible when everybody that's on title can actually be in the house at the same time. What is the first available appointment, personally for me, and I don't know if Daniel's the same way, For me, what is the first available time where both people that are on title are going to be in the house at the same time? That's when we want to set our appointment, because a contract signed by one of the two parties is not a valid contract. Okay. So even if, let's say for instance, I'm talking on the phone and they say, I get off of work, I'll be home at 8 tonight. And you're like, okay, well, what about your husband? Is your husband going to be there as well? And they're like, no, my husband's actually out of town. He'll get back tomorrow at, 7. Are you going to be there tomorrow at 7? Yes, I'm going to be there. Okay, so I'll meet you there tomorrow at 7 so that we can get this all taken care of together. If even somebody shows up tonight with just the wife and gets that sold or gets that contracted, they don't have a valid contract. They can't file a memo on that. If I show up at 7 tomorrow and get both parties signed on it, that's a validly executed contract. That one is the only one that actually matters. So I want to make sure that we've got everybody on title in the house at the same time, because otherwise it's not a contract that matters unless you have both people. And I will tell you this from experience. If you rely on the wife to tell the husband why you've pitched what you pitched, the husband's going to say no. If you rely on the husband to communicate your information to the wife is going to say no. You need both of them there because you are the negotiator. You are the salesperson that understands how to speak to different people's language centers. And so you need to be able to respond to both of their questions as they have them, because you understand that a head person needs head answers and a heart person needs heart answers. But if the husband's head and the wife is heart, and you've only pitched to the husband, and then the wife is trying to ask why you're coming up with these numbers, and the husband's given a head pitch to a heart person, she's going to say no, and he's going to come back and say, sorry, the wife, you canceled out on this. We're not going to do the deal, right? You've got to have it there so that you can say, look, I just want you guys to know that we really want to make sure that we're taking care of you. We've got a really good deal in front of you. I'm going to be buying this house at $90,000, which makes sense that you're getting the best offer that you possibly can on this. Because look, we respect that this is a house you've lived in for a long time. And we want to come in here and give you the best offer so that we can come in here, fix it up, make it beautiful again for a new family. But you're going to be able to take this money and go buy the next house that you're looking for, because I know you're already shopping for that next beautiful thing. See how I'm just kind of talking back and forth, heart, head, heart, head, heart, head. Then they both say yes, you get a contract and you move on. It will not work if you rely on one party to relay it to the other person, in my experience. Daniel, how do you feel about that? Making sure that both people on title are there for your first appointment, and the communication from one party to the other.
Well, there's several things that you brought up that I absolutely love, and I absolutely do love. One of the things, like, this was a key takeaway I took away from a conversation you and I had probably close to a month ago, and that was, let's notify the seller right then and there that the goal of this appointment is a contract. So that way they're already preparing for, that's what we're trying to do here. But one of the things that you also said is you want all parties that are part of this contract there to sign right then and there, because you don't want to waste the time of showing up just to find out you've only got 50% of the ownership there to sign. I do have caveats to that,
Absolutely.
though. I do have caveats to that, though. And that is, let's say I do have a pretty solid deal in my mind going on right now. Like, I know for a pretty solid fact, I've got a deal going on right here. I would personally much rather have a 50% signature than no signature at all. So there will be times where it's like, okay, I think I've got a really solid deal on the line. I'll at least get half of it contracted right now. And then once I've got half of it contracted, then I will start really pushing hard to figure out how we're going to get the other half to sign on it, because I've already got one person on my team. All right, let's have this conversation. Where are the other half at? And I really want to put that in on a specialty type of contract, and that's when I'm dealing with estates. When I'm dealing with a deceased homeowner.
I absolutely agree with that. With like probates, absolutely. Yeah. You get anybody you can get to sign, and then you deal with the other parties for sure.
Yeah, so on a probate or an estate where I've got a deceased homeowner and I might have 14 different heirs, I deal with the one person that's willing to contract with me, and then I work with that person to get the other heirs to all contact me, and then I'll start working through one at a time, and as many as I can to get through that. But like, if I've got a husband and wife, I will always try to contract whoever I can contract right then and there, and then work through any objections that I might get from the husband. But I try to do that right then and there while I'm on the couch. It's like, okay, we've got you to agree. Can we get the husband on the phone? Can we get this person on the phone? Can we get that person on the phone? Okay, they're going to be home in a couple hours. You know what? I'm kind of hungry. You want me to go pick you up something to eat? Because I'll go over there, grab something to eat real quick, and I'll try and come back. But if I've got a really hot deal on the table, I do try it personally to get at least half of the contract if I can. Now, that's not every single case.
Sure. No, I love that. And again, pointing out everybody does things a little bit differently and has our reasons why. And we're both high converters. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to land this plane here. We've got some questions that I want to get through. If you have any questions on this, please, we're paying attention. Please comment in YouTube, comment in Facebook, wherever you're watching this. We've got like, Abby says, hello, another session packed with golden nuggets. I love that. Got a bunch of hundos from Kip. Great information from Isabel. Claudio pointing out, having common ground is key. And Jim Murray saying, thanks for the video. This is a very important topic, and I need to get better. And I think we all need to get better. This is something for us to all really focus on. Thank you to Anna Marie Bolds and Bruce Torres for sharing this, right? Guys, we're taking time out of, I've got 3 houses closing today. Daniel's got a lot of stuff going. We're taking time out because we want to make sure that you, the community, are taken care of and have the information you need to actually go buy houses, right? And we're doing this for free, and we're doing this because we're passionate about it. But that's not to say that we don't have ways that we monetize as well. And our principle here is that as long as we are just always giving you everything you need, we're not holding stuff back. We just have ways that you can work closer to us. So if you like the way I teach, check out creativecashflow.com. I've got lots of different ways to work on teaching, right? We've got a mastermind that is just phenomenal. We've got some killer people in that mastermind. One of our guys joined less than 6 weeks ago. He's closing his first sub 2 wrap today. He's going to own the house for like 4 hours before he flips it out and starts making money on that thing. There's just a lot going on over there. I'd love the opportunity to help be by your side as you're learning. But then also Propelio. None of this stuff happens without Propelio software, right? Propelio and Daniel, what these guys have done is just phenomenal. And they've started this drive, and they've kind of recreated the culture out here of, hey, there's enough information for everybody. And they work with people like me to make sure that, Daniel's a high performer, I'm a high performer. Let's actually give these people some information that can actually affect their bottom line and help them retire. And they have stuff that's going to help you with that, whether it's your comping or your marketing. You can get 150,000 leads a day from Propelio.
A year,
they handle
not
your
a year,
websites.
a
they
month.
give you
150,000
a month.
a month.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Which is more than you need. Like, nobody's going to be getting a 150. I shouldn't say nobody, but it's more than you need for sure. They handle your website, so you can have an actual respectable email address and an actual respectable website for people to go to. I mean, the stuff that these guys do is just incredible, and he's even letting you get into it for free. If you're not already a user of it, check out propelio.com, do the free trial. It's just an email to get in, and you'll be blown away. It absolutely is a tool that you need in your back pocket. And then if you like more education, don't forget that the Propelio Academy exists. Propelio.com/academy is free education from some of the biggest players there are, really giving you the behind-the-scenes look on how to do a bunch of this stuff. So check that out. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to land this plane. Please, again, ask questions. We do want to answer these questions because of the amount of time that we want to spend on really diving into these things. I think probably the best thing for us to do is, like, today we kind of focused on Daniel's call. Maybe next week we focus on my call. Does that sound good, Daniel? And we'll kind of do the same thing, but reverse the roles. Right?
That sounds perfect.
So next week, what we'll do is we'll dig into how my team handles calls, how I handle calls, and we'll see the similarities, we'll see the differences, and you can extract which ones make the most sense for you. But let's dive right in. So Santiago Luna says, say that the seller's stuck on 90,000 and the ARV is 140. Do you contract for 90 and then renegotiate based on your initial walkthrough?
So for me personally, I have two lines on that side. So let's say through my due diligence over the phone, I'm feeling that my max offer is probably around 70. Now they're asking for 90. I'm not really feeling that's comfortable. I would contract it at 90, but, and I do need to put a very clear emphasis on this, I make it very, very clear to the seller that when I contract that, it is subject to my walkthrough. Because I don't want to come across as saying, oh yeah, man, I'm going to buy it for 90, 110% sure. And then all I do for the next 2 weeks is just start chipping away at that price. Because I don't consider that to be very ethical. I don't really personally like that. But I will very clearly state that, based upon what you've told me, I'll contract at 90, but I really do need to do that walkthrough. Now, what I would never do is go through and contract it at 90. And then after I've gone through any option periods I've got or anything like that, I see people do this a lot with pre-foreclosures, and it absolutely infuriates me, is that they will hold on to that contract until the day of the auction. and then renegotiate the price right then and there when the seller has no choice but to renegotiate and or lose their house. And I think that is absolutely despicable. I am not a fan of the people that will put it under contract with no option periods and then pretend as though the contract is not even legitimate and just constantly renegotiate the whole time through. I don't think that's very ethical. I know a lot of people do it. I know of people that teach doing that. I hate it. I don't think it's right to do, and I won't do it.
Agree. Yeah, absolutely. We do a lot of renegotiation because we're doing remote now. But again, it's all about proper expectations and communication with your seller, letting them know why everything is going on. And I think that the ethical response on that side of things is that we never contract under a number that we would not close on as long as the scenario that's been presented to us at that point is true. Okay. So that's kind of how we, because again, I hate the whole let's just contract with a number and wait on the renegotiation thing. Every contract we get signed, we would close on that deal as long as the scenario proves out to be true that has been presented to us so far. But if our walkthrough presents that there's bigger numbers or, whatever, our BPO comes back lower, then we will renegotiate. But that's a very fair reason to do so, right? So that's kind of our position on the renegotiation. That is a integral part of the remote purchasing. But never contract a house for something you would not be willing to buy it for, in my opinion. You think that's a good way to boil that down, Daniel?
Yeah, and to put some context to my statement is like, all right, I don't really think that 90 is a good number for me, but I have not personally seen the house. 90 is a $60,000 discount off of retail. The discount's steep enough that maybe the seller through conversations made it sound more different or more distressed than what I'm seeing. So I do need to put eyeballs on it. 90,000 is a number that's close enough to where I need to be that without seeing it, maybe I would close at 90. And in the back of my head, I'm saying there's like maybe a 20% chance I'll close at 90. But I do make sure that I set the expectations with the seller properly, and I let them know that this offer is contingent upon my walkthrough, and that once I've walked it, maybe my repairs are way out of budget. Maybe they're real high, maybe they're real low. And then from there, I can decide whether that 90 was perfect or not. But I'm not going to sit there and say, I don't need no option period guarantee. We'll close in 3 days, $90,000, good to go. Pack everything up, get moved out. And then they've already got everything in their moving van, and they've already moved. They've already got deposits on their new place. They're expecting their home to close. And then I'm like, oh, well, we can't close. I need a $50,000 discount. That is not cool. I will never do that.
Yep. Yeah, that's terrible. All right, let's because and by the way, I did have to push back a meeting I had at 12:15, so let's try and roll this through. Right. But I do want to get a couple of that follow-up time period for you. It's a good question.
I'm answering somebody else's question via text real quick. So give me 2 seconds to hit that. All right. So what is my follow-up period? So if I'm on the phone and I hit somebody up, my follow-up period, I don't have like a process or procedure for it, but I kind of base it upon their motivation and what they sound like. Like if they sound semi-motivated and I'm not able to pull it off right then and there, I'll set the follow-up for 48 hours, 24 hours. So maybe I'll be the one to follow up. Maybe I'll have somebody in my office follow up. The next part to that is if they don't sound very motivated at all, I'll set them on a longer follow-up, 30 days out. And then do I ask them for permission? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. I'm not gonna, okay, is it okay if I follow up with you in 30 days? Other times I won't ask or say anything at all. I'll just put them into my follow-up system and call them back in 30 days. Now, is there something right or wrong about that? I'm not necessarily sure. But that's just kind of what I would do inside of my own office.
And one thing that I can point out for you too is oftentimes if you're dealing with somebody who decides to go with another offer, right? Say that there's two offers on the table and they decide to go with the other offer. Always ask them when the closing date is set for that other offer, and then call them the day after closing or the day of closing, right? Put it in your follow-up. So call them the day that deal was supposed to close and just say, hey, this is Grant. I talked to you about a month ago. You said that you had taken that other offer from so-and-so, so-and-so. You were supposed to be closing with that today. Is that going to closing today still, or has that fallen through? Because so often if you get one of these guys, and you might even do it a couple of days ahead of time, because if they're like super pissed with the person who's buying, because like we'll do anything. Typically I recommend a week ahead of time, a few days ahead of time, but at the latest the day of or the day after, because what if they do hit that situation? Most of these guys that are going to do kind of the unethical, like, hey, I'm going to change it up on them at the last minute, are going to do it in the last few days. So if you talk to them like 5 to 7 days ahead of time and you're just like, hey, you're supposed to be closing next week, is that still set to go to closing? And they're like, yes. then you can say, I just wanted to, reach out to you. I had it in my notes that you were there. I really liked your neighborhood. I still am interested in your house. If these guys try to pull a fast one on you, don't feel like you have to do that. I'm still here. My offer is still going to be on the table. So, feel free to contact me if they try to switch things up on you at the last minute, and we'll get you taken care of the right way. Right. And then if they do try to have that renegotiation from the other person, well, now the seller's not stuck, and by golly, you're going to be the one that they call because you showed them that you care enough to even follow up on a deal that's not yours, right? So that's a good way on timing a follow-up there too. We got another question from Jim asking to kind of re-go over the head, heart, gut thing. I'll tell you what, we're going to do that next week during my presentation on our call. We will talk about the head, heart, and gut negotiation centers. That's going to be a massive help to y'all's conversion rates. And then I think the last one that we're going to answer here is going to be from T5. Maybe it's a Tyla on this T5Y LLA or LL4. See, that's how elite I am. I just read the 4 as an A immediately. Sorry. So would you consider the scenario unethical? Seller contacts you, you come to a verbal agreement and get picks from the seller, and then you start marketing it out to see where the buyers are before contracting.
Great question.
Yes, I would. Yeah. So personally, it's illegal to market a property that you don't have interest in, right? So you've got to have the contract, which gives you interest in that property. And even if you have that contract, there's some things that you have to do to be able to market it during that option period, like in the contract itself with your seller, it should be disclosed that you are going to market this property for sale to other people. And when you're selling it, different states have different rules on what you have to disclose in that marketing campaign that says that you don't own the house, you're just selling your interest like in the contract for it. But yeah, absolutely. I think it's a terrible idea. I do think it's unethical and it's illegal to market a property for sale before you have it under contract. And then from an opinion side, I really dislike because sometimes people will do marketing for fake properties that don't exist in an area to see what the interest is for buyers in that area. I also don't like that one. That's just my opinion on that side of things there too. Daniel, where do you feel on that? And then let's land the plane here and get out of here so we can. I've got to get to that other meeting, and then we'll pick back up on this topic next week.
Most definitely. So we've still got questions coming in. For those that are still coming in, I'll try and catch them back on text, but we do need to go ahead and close this out. But yeah, I 100% resonate what you just said, Grant, and that is it's not legal. You're acting as a real estate agent at that point in time. You are doing things that are clearly defined in most states, as far as I know of. You're not allowed to market a property unless you have equitable interest in that property or you're a real estate agent. So what you're proposing there, I do see people teach that. And I really want to rewind that back and be like, you really shouldn't be doing that. So all of that to be said, great question. Don't feel bad for asking that, because that is a great question to ask. Sure. But what I need you to know is that no, we shouldn't be doing that. We need to have equitable interest in the property. And like in the state of Texas, for sure, the state of Texas regulates how we market that property. We can't say that we have 123 Main Street for sale, because we don't have 123 Main Street for sale. We have equitable interest in a contract for sale. We're selling a contract. We're not selling 123 Main Street. So we have to make sure that we disclose that properly whenever we go out and market that property. So to move on and move past that, we definitely want contract before we do that. Now, there are times where I've got a property that is something I probably wouldn't typically contract because it's an oddball. It's something that's a little outside of the norm. But I do have people in my network that I know have specialty interests in properties like that. Let's say I find an oddball 1920s 8-bed 4-bath house that's a row house in the middle of a low-income neighborhood. That sounds really awkward, especially when the neighborhood is consistently built of 2-bed 1-bath houses with no garages. Well, that oddball house is really an oddball, but I know somebody that likes to do a halfway house. They like halfway houses. What I mean is like people that are coming out of prison and that they're boarding them as a kind of an in-between prison and getting out back into normal life. Well, I might go ahead and give that person a call because I already have an established relationship with them and say, hey, I've got an 8-bed 4-bath house over here in a low-income neighborhood. Are you buying right now? And if so, what would you be interested for on a house like this? I might have that personal conversation, but there's no way I'd go out there and start throwing it out on Facebook and stuff like that. So I want to throw that caveat in there that maybe that is is, by the definition of the law, illegal, but I wholeheartedly do have those phone calls every now and then. If I have a key buyer in place that I already know wants that type of property, I'll give them a phone call to get a ballpark idea of what they're interested in.
Right. And to that point, I have no problem with that either, because that conversation with that buyer is probably going to be, hey, man, I've got this house that's a lead of mine, and I'm probably not going to contract it unless you're interested in it. I just know that this is kind of up your alley. Is this something that you would want? If so, I'll grab it. And you know what I mean? Like you're still just being honest with what that situation is. So I think that's a good point. I'm glad that we talk about these things. And I also want to point out, like, please, this is a shame-free zone. This is a place to be vulnerable, to ask the questions. If you don't ask the questions, you don't know the answers, right? So don't interpret us being like, oh, that's illegal, don't do that. Like, this is not a shaming thing unless you continue to go do that afterwards. In that point in time, if you know that it's wrong and you do it anyway, we want you out of the business. But if you don't know that it's wrong and you're asking a question, that's a part of education. We all thought something was a great idea until we found out that it wasn't on something at some point in time, right? So be vulnerable. Use this community to help you grow. That's why we are here. All right, guys, we're gonna wrap this up here. Like I said, I got to grab another important meeting that we got to get to at this point in time. But I'm glad we got to take this time to go over this very integral part of the negotiation process and take a look at, what does this roadmap look like? What are we trying to do here? How are you talking to your seller? And we saw, like, Liz says, thank you so much, with like 16 zeros, so many nuggets. Elizabeth says, I've learned new nuggets. Angel says, thanks for the transparency and tip. That's what we want to be for you guys. We want to make sure that we are helping you get where you want to go. So just like always, if you have any suggestions of something that you're interested in seeing a topic on, feel free, DM me through Facebook, or Daniel through Facebook. Let us know something you're interested in. We want to help you guys succeed at the end of the day. Again, my name's Grant Kemp. CreativeCashflow.com is my game. If you guys want to, I should have said, and my name. The point was to rhyme those things, right? If you guys like the way that I teach, if you want to get a little bit more of that, please check me out at CreativeCashflow.com. Propelio is the reason all of this happens, and it is a phenomenal software tool that you need in order to kind of take things up to that next level. And it is way underpriced, and it is exactly what you need. So check out Propelio.com. Daniel, is there anything else that you wanted to throw out there before we dismount today?
No, I'm going to make this quick, but for those of you that are not familiar with Propelio.com, please do me the favor of going out there and checking it out. We've made some massive updates if you've checked it out in the past. There is no place that I know of that brings as much value as we do, and we do offer a 14-day free trial, no credit card required. You don't have to worry about going in there, signing up for a trial, forgetting to cancel, and then getting billed. We don't do it that way. We believe that we provide so much value that anybody that's serious about this business will see the value that's there and see the benefit to their business and sign up anyways. So that to be said, you can get websites for your business. So that way, if a seller goes out there and tries to find your business online, they have some place to find you. We can get you set up with professional emails. So that way you're no longer using ibuyhouses@gmail.com. We can get you up to 150,000 leads per month on public record. We can also get you national MLS comps and a Driving for Dollars application for your phone to assist you in driving for dollars. All of that included in a single price of $98 a month. We do have different pricing options out there and available, so go check out Propelio.com. I appreciate the support. I appreciate everybody out here in this community. I appreciate you, Grant, for bringing in the value that you bring in on these shows. And don't forget to check out CreativeCashflow.com. Grant Kemp was my mentor. He was one of the people that taught me how to do what I do. And when it comes to Subject 2, he is the expert that I seek out whenever I have questions about Subject 2 financing or anything else. I mean, he has a solid network and a solid mind for this business. So, keep those things in mind. So for everybody out there, I do appreciate you. I'm going to go ahead and land the plane. Grant, any final thoughts?
Nope, that's it. We'll see you next week as we go over what my phone call looks like. And thanks for being here and giving us your brain for a second.
All right. Well, much love, guys, and y'all have a great day. All right. See ya.
See ya.